Hello, everyone, and welcome to a wonderful new episode of this StudioMEcast. I am your host, and today we have another special guest. This is Darcy Prevost, who is a production designer and a set designer, and it doesn't stop there, but we're just going to get right into it. So, Darcy, thank you for joining me today.
Happy to be here.
So, we've known each other for quite a long time.
Yes, since you were
a little boy, and because I knew you when my older brother was in high school.
Yes.
And you've gone from, helping to making the sets for those high school musicals all the way up through what you do now. I know at least some of the notable things that you've done, but why don't you just give us a little bit of some of the work that you've done up to this point?
It's so funny when people ask me about my previous work. It's like you instantly forget everything you've ever done. My career has been kind of wild, not on a linear path since those days designing High School Musical scenery, which I'm grateful for because I learned a lot in those years. But I've done reality television, I've done scripted television, I've been an art director, a set designer, a model maker, a production designer. I work a lot on puppet projects or dark serial killer projects. Never the two have mixed yet, but that tends to be my area of expertise lately. Some of the actual projects, my favorites, we'll say.
Mm-hmm.
I got to set design on the Gilmore Girls revival, which was really cool for me as a fan. I production designed Muppets Haunted Mansion, which is probably my best work to date, we'll say. I've done a lot of things for the Jim Henson Company, some big, some small over the years, and I've worked with them for about a decade, and I love working with them. They're probably my favorites. I go wherever people need me and ask of me. I've done little movies, I've done big movies, I've done little TV shows, I've done big TV shows. I've been all over the place. So,
well, that's awesome, and I've been able to, occasionally been able to keep up with what you're doing. I'd be like, oh my gosh, that's happening! Like you received an Emmy for your work on the Muppets Haunted Mansion. So congrats again for that.
You. It's still crazy, but
I think
yes.
My brother told me, I think that when you were the set, I think you were the set designer for the Jim Henson Creature Shop show on Hulu.
I think my actual title we can get into titles. It's people do not understand our department titles. I don't understand them half the time. Technically, I was the assistant art director on the Jim Henson Creature Shop Challenge, which was my first project for the Jim Henson Company. But I was designing the sets that the contestants were competing their weekly creatures on, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't do like the big studio set or revamp the creature shop. That was the production designer. And then they had me kind of do those little vignette sets on the Jim Henson lot that changed every week for the competitions.
So I want to talk about that because I recently had a guest who's a filmmaker who has never done a creature film before, but is going to soon. Hopefully, yeah, I'm sure he'll pull through on it. And I understand there's a difference between a creature and a puppet sometimes.
Yes.
Now for that show with the Jim Henson Company, you're making these new sets every week. And the contestants are making these new creatures every week.
Yep.
Did you get to see the creatures or the concepts before you started making the set, or vice versa? Like, was there a relationship at all with where their creatures would be shown and presented?
Yes, and it's so funny thinking back to that project because I had no idea what I was doing. Like, now that I've done about 10 puppet projects, I would be far better prepared for such a task. I really had no idea what I was doing. But the challenge producers had in advance laid out what each weekly competition was going to be. So they could say, okay, this week it's a swamp. And they each get a pit somewhere in your set. So then I we only had a certain amount of square footage to work with. And then I designed, okay, they each have the same hole in the decking. And then I'm going to create environments around each of those holes. But that's their spot. And then we, like the challenge producers came to me. I went to like the Jackson or Green Set where we can get all of our plant rentals out in LA. Like you just go to a giant plant rental place and say, what do you got for swamp trees? And they'll drive you around and show you what they have. So I kind of came up with, here's 10 different things that they can pick from. And the challenge producers looked at them and went, yeah, one should have a lily pad. One can do the juniper. One can do the tall grass. So there's always a collaboration on those projects, but they knew it was a swamp and they knew each contestant had a pit. And then we worked together with what was available for plants. They picked which ones the contestants could pick from, and then the contestants went from there.
Wow, that's so cool.
And that happened very quickly. These were like 1 week turnarounds between design, build, and staging.
Wow, and and for everybody on it, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was very fast, very fast.
So how far in advance did you know what the set was gonna be? Like, I know you had a week to make it, but it was like at the beginning of the week, it's like, make a swamp, and that was it? Or did you know at the beginning one of them's gonna be a swamp, one of them's gonna be a tavern?
I was kind of brought into that project late.
Okay.
So I don't really know how it worked before I got there. I was brought in kind of as a last minute. The production designer at the time needed help. That production designer was then replaced by a new production designer within like my first week of starting. So that also happens on projects, which is hard to talk about and hard to think about because you never want to be the one who could be replaced. But so I hit the ground running. Like my first day was our first day of filming. So I was not there for pre-production at all. So wow. I had
that's fun.
I had no like warm up. Like hopefully you get a few weeks of pre-production usually. So I remember the first episode was like underwater sea creatures. That's all we knew. And that they were just going to be on flat decking. So we gave them some stuff on the stage to kind of interact with. So it looked like they were kicking up some dirt which was like sponge that I had to get painted, which was a whole nightmare. Like I said, I had no idea what I was doing, but you never had time to think too far ahead because it took the whole time. So it was just like, just focus on this underwater scene, films in a week. So I would do a sketch. I would do 3D models. I'd get them approved by the production designer and Brian Henson. And then the minute they were like done and up, it was like the production designer would hand me a research image for the next week.
Wow.
Like I remember for the Wizards one, he had this great image of like kind of a curved dungeon room. And he was like, go, like I like the look of this, go. And then I would 3D model in SketchUp my ideas. And it was almost always first idea went.
Wow.
Which was a little bit freeing. Like I don't get that kind of, now it's like sometimes you could beat a set to death before it gets developed and you can get more detail in that way, but sometimes the freedom of just like first idea, build it was kind of cool. Like some cool stuff came out of that.
Yeah, that's wild. And being able to world build on a weekly basis.
It was a dream.
Yeah.
I was having the time of my life and everybody knew it. Like I was like, I never wanted to go home. I was building models. Like I was doing computer models, but then I was building physical models of the sets for fun because I'm crazy. So like just like a little white model, like even though I would present it in computer form, I would then just like, I'm a fast model maker. So I would just quickly make the Dark Crystal set in like gray and like bring it to Brian and be like, what do you think? He's like, great. I think like we were moving so fast. I remember one of the only notes I got was for the tavern set. Like the production designer, Elvis Strange, he drew out the basic ground plan. He's like, I want 2 doors upstage and a bar downstage. So he would just kind of give me the basic framework and then he had a million other things to do. So he'd be like, have fun. And so I designed it and I remember I presented it like in Brian Henson's office. And I think Lisa Henson was like, could you make it a different color? And I just like made it kind of like the color of your shirt. I just clicked it to green and she's like, great. Like, I think that was as like big of notes as we had time for. You know what I mean? Can you change the color? Yes, click.
So you work with 3D animation or modeling software a lot. That's really cool. Yes. So, at what do you start in 3D like in the do you start in the software or with the drawings or with the physical? So
it depends on the project.
Okay.
I'm so fast at SketchUp because of my work in television that mostly requires SketchUp work because they need quick and dirty more than something like Rhino. Or you can do, I tell this to people all the time who are coming out of school. They ask me about software all the time. It doesn't matter so much what software you just better be good at it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like some people frown on SketchUp, but then they see my blueprints and they assume they're done in Vectorworks. So it's because I'm good at layout. So it doesn't matter what program you're using. You just have to be good at conveying your ideas and the ideas of your bosses. And then they don't really care as long as they can talk together.
Absolutely.
But yes, I tend to start in the computer now because it just goes so fast. That's not true. I usually put pencil to paper first, just for quick little thumbnail, just to work out ideas. Mm-hmm. And then I quickly go into computer because, again, there's usually not enough time to be like, let's like really sit back and get, it's just like, okay, I gotta start working. So
that's really cool because, I mean, a lot of people, I think, might assume when you're doing set design that you work with your hands a lot, and so you might start with that. You know, like I know that a lot of people might start with a physical model of something, but it's really cool to hear how people use newer tools to just make things go faster. And
physical models are still the best. Mm-hmm. They're the best. I did the Fabelmans with Spielberg recently, and it kind of blew my mind because Rick Carter, award-winning production designer who has worked with him a ton, he had this amazing art department that can do everything. And it was kind of a small but mighty art department. And they had amazing computer modelers, amazing illustrators, and had pretty much done most of the previs work in computer. Mm-hmm. And they brought me on to make 1/4-inch white architectural models. And I was a little confused by that. I was like, why in the world do you need me? Feels like taking a step backwards when you already have the sets mostly designed in the computer. Yeah. And he said, and it's true, not everybody can look at a flat computer image or even a fly-through digitally and really understand space. Whereas like a physical model is something you can pick up. You can put your face in it. You can move it around. You can move it however you want without knowing technology.
Yeah.
Like when producers come into my office when I'm set designing, and the production designer will be standing there and be like, open up this model, fly around it for me, show them this, show them that. I'm still the one who has to like use my 3D mouse and fly through my model. Whereas when I handed off these 1/4-inch white models, they can take that home.
Right.
They can move, like I make the walls wild, which means you can remove the walls. So like they can pull the walls out and put their face in, and they can plan their own shots. So they're not, they don't have to be as dependent. It's impossible to keep up with all the technology, especially when your job is directing or producing. A physical white model is just, it's a tool that you can hand off that people do not need to know technology for. And so it's still a really valid tool. And I love when I get to make them.
That is so cool.
It
makes so much sense, too. Yeah. It's like, you don't need to be taught how to do this.
Yeah, if you're a good director and I send you a SketchUp model, you're going to be like, I don't understand. How do I even, I don't have it downloaded. I don't have the free version downloaded on my computer. Like what? Mm-hmm. So then you have to send just still images, but maybe I haven't picked scenes that show the way they want to set up their shots. Yeah. So then they're kind of like stuck in what I send them. So yeah, the best production designers, like the old school production designers that I still work with, they'll almost always have white models.
That's incredible. So I want to ask a little bit about being on a Spielberg project.
Sure.
All right. So, because you hear about how the director really can set the tone on set when people are filming, whether it's making a more cheerful place or a terrifying place or whatever it is.
Had both.
Yeah. So how does that extend, not just on a day of filming on set, but how can the director, I guess, affect the tone of the work you do? Like, I guess the work environment, because maybe they're not there as often, or I don't know what is the relationship there, or the atmosphere? How can it be affected that way?
Well, it's important, Spielberg and I were not besties. So it's not like I had a direct relationship with him.
I know.
But on the projects that I production design, directors are so important because they're usually the first ones brought in by the producers who help, and they're usually the ones who pick the production designer. So they're the top of the pyramid. I mean, sometimes producers are, but producers tend to float around the perimeter a little bit more and maybe aren't as directly involved with everybody. But the director really sets the tone for the project because they're the ones who have to talk to all the department heads and make sure that you're all on the same page. So there's like trickle down. If the director and the production designer are constantly fighting, then the production designer is going to come back to their crew in a bad mood and, yell at their crew for not doing things better. Potentially. I've never done such a thing. But yes, I've had directors on set, Kirk Thatcher, who I work with often, like he'll bring out his little ukulele in between takes, like downtime. And I think that saved me from like 4 panic attacks minimum on the first project he and I did together, because it was just like smoke was always coming out of my ears. And you just hear like a little ukulele sound in the background. I'd go, okay, it's fine. It's just television. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, we're okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a huge thing. Whereas if your director's always stressed out or they don't know what they want, that's an important one.
Yeah.
If you're the director, you got to know what you want. You're in charge of knowing what you want. It's your vision. We're all just trying to make your vision come true. So sometimes I have worked with directors who just like can't make a decision, and then we're all working really long hours and we're already there long hours. So it's very important that that's why I'm not a director. You have to know what you want. You have to execute it. You have to know how to manage a whole crew. These are things people don't necessarily understand coming in. It's the same with production designing. I didn't understand. I thought when you were the production designer, you were just like, you got to design the world. It was your imagination. I had no idea you were in charge of running your whole crew and making sure that everyone was fine. So you can't just be a good artist. You have to be a good manager too.
Yeah, it's a leadership role as well, which doesn't immediately occur to people.
It did
all
not
the time.
immediately occur to me. In one of my first production design projects, I think once a day, one of my crew members was in my office crying, and not about the project, like about their personal lives or like something somebody said to them. And I had to manage that. And then I had to stay late to actually get my work done because I had to keep my crew afloat.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that would happen.
Well, sometimes it's heavy weighs the crown, I guess.
Sure. Which is why I do not only take production design jobs. I'm not there yet. I don't know how people manage that stress all the time.
Yeah, it's unbelievable just thinking of the amount of creative force that the job requires, but then the other elements, the stuff that the job requires is like, you're with a lot of other people. Just the examples
and you
gave.
Have to make sure they all have something to do. So that was a really hard thing for me. I can do most things in the art department. That's why I like the art department. I don't get to do most of them when I'm production designing. I have to make sure everybody else is doing them because I'm in meetings all day. Yeah. That was another thing that kind of blew my mind. I was just like, oh, now that I'm the production designer, I'm just going to sit in my office and draw pictures all day. It's like, no, you're not. You're going to be in meetings 90% of the day.
Yeah, when I started filmmaking, I didn't realize how much of it was going to essentially be a desk job.
Yeah.
with just post-production stuff, which I love working with other people in post-production. It's like I don't typically want to be the one editing my own things. Like, I mean, I want to be there.
Yes.
Obviously. I don't want to just, all right, make my movie for me. It's like, no, I'd like to direct. And, so you mentioned the director needs to know what they want. All right.
Yes.
Now, to what degree is that balanced with the other artists, such as yourself, being able to contribute to the vision? How does that work with a director? Do you have more freedom with that if the director isn't sure what they want and you kind of fill the void? Like, how does it go?
It's just like anything else where a healthy middle ground is probably what you really desire. Because I have worked on projects, and as a set designer, I work under the production designer to help them fulfill their vision by doing computer models and draftings. So just as a set designer who has a production designer who is like, will basically hand you a 90% finished set and be like, model this and draft it for the carpenters to build. And you're like, okay. Sometimes that's fine because you're just like, I can listen to my audiobook and like just be the little worker bee and get this done quickly and efficiently to help them. And it's great. And then other times, like I said, you'll be handed a research image and like a rough ground plan. And that's like, it's still their vision. It's still their design, but there's a lot of meat left on the bone for you to get creative, because then you do your first pass and you come back and you're almost selling it back to your production designer. Like, okay, I was thinking based on your ground plan and this research image, I did some other research and I found that this type of window was really popular in this time period. And look at this cool picture of one I found. What do you think? Could that go here? And then if it's a good working relationship, there can be some back and forth, and you get to feel like when you see that set on air, even though it's the production designer's design, you're like, that's my set. Like I contributed to that. So I do both when I'm production designing myself, because I know how important it can be. Like every once in a while, it's like, no, this because of the script or a conversation I had with the director, this is the set and this is the way it needs to be. And like, not a lot of wiggle room. But other times, and I know it's important for all my crew to get to feel some ownership over something on screen. You know what I mean? To feel like I did that. Yeah. Like that was my decision. I told Darcy about that and she let me do, so I think it's more fun when your crew gets to have a little piece of ownership, as long as they're not just like constantly fighting your vision. It just has to fall within the vision of the people at the top. And that's not to keep people down. It's because usually they're the ones who are in the meetings and know why something has to be a certain way. Right. But I love when I get a little creative freedom. It's fun.
Now, you love that. What is in all the type of work you do, all right, which is vast, but what is your favorite thing? Like, what's your favorite moment when you're working? Is it when you see it on screen when it's done? Is it while you're fabricating something? What's like the thing that it's the best for you?
That's so fun. I have to really think about that. I mean, I think it's probably the thing that made me become a set designer in the first place, because I didn't know set designing was a job you could have growing up here in Pittsburgh. I went to school for theater, which is how we met. And I was at Pitt for undergrad for architecture, engineering, and theater. And I assisted a set designer for a production of Rashomon. Her name is Julie Ray. At Pitt. No way. And she, bless her, as she knew I had no idea what I was doing, she let me draw and help design the front, like the proscenium, which was kind of the Japanese temple. So she gave me a few little projects to get to kind of wet my whistle, because I think she could tell I was interested in the career. So she let me draw this like corbel, like a bracket for a temple, like a corner piece that held up a beam. And I drew it, like in pencil, designed it out, put some rough dimensions on it, and we gave it to our carpenter. And then I came into the shop and it was there. exactly the way I drew it, which was way too big because I didn't understand scale. I still design sets way too big. It is a common problem. But that was it for me. That moment of like, I drew a thing and then someone made it. Like, it's wild. And it does still happen when I design a set in the computer or in model form, and then you walk through it. Because I'm not the one swinging the hammer. All these talented artists and carpenters and painters take your drawings and your vision and they make it in real life. It's wild. Like walking onto a soundstage and walking through sets. I think that's the most magical.
That's so cool.
So I often do not like I've had shows where they're like, can you just design the set? Because there are companies who do that, like that design talk show sets, and they design it, they pass it off, it gets built, and they're on to their next thing. I like to be a part of, I want to be there for the filming, because to me, that's like the magic. It's not me sitting alone in my apartment drawing pictures, hoping that they get approved and that the budget goes through. Like, I like to be on set with the other artists and seeing the actors in that space. Like, to me, that's where like the magic comes to life. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It
hasn't gotten old.
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool. And hearing about Rashomon, love that movie. It's like, I mean, my thing is I get so enamored with seeing something on screen. Yeah. You know, that was in here. But the way you describe, like, I'm looking through a window to another world. You talking about getting to walk through that in real, like, absolutely.
It's amazing. There is a difference for me seeing it on screen. Like, there's still like a woo, you know, like, oh my gosh, especially when you get to like watch it in a movie theater. Yeah, you're just like, wow. But there's a separation there for me. Like, I was able to watch the Gilmore Girls revival as a fan, like, completely. Like, even scenes where I knew I was standing behind a wall, like, I was still just completely, I was just like, what's going to happen? Like such a little fangirl. So, like, I become separated once there's a screen. For me, the magic is, like, the tactile, like, being there and seeing it happen and knowing what happened right before or after a take.
Do you think that might be because a lot of your roots were in live theater productions?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a thing that Leslie Odom Jr., who was Aaron Burr in Hamilton.
Oh, great, yes.
I heard him say something in an interview once that really resonated with me, that, like, he wanted to become an actor not because he saw, like, some great emotional thing. He saw an inside joke or something happening between the cast during a production, like a wink. And he's just like, those are real people and they're friends and they're having a great time up there. And I want to just be a part of that. And so to me, like, that's where it stems from for me too. Like, with theater, like, I never wanted to be an actor. I always tell people I am not behind camera because I failed at being an actor. Like, I do not feel comfortable in front of a camera. It's not, a lot of people, acting is very hard. Becoming successful at acting is very difficult. So some people morph into other careers because it's just not sustainable. That was not me. But you could be part of a theater production and you're still part of it. So, yeah, like at Pitt, I did everything. I did act, I danced, I stage managed, I worked as a set designer. And every time, it didn't matter what position I was in, you were part of that little group of misfit, carny circus, you know, like, we're all just, those are my people. So you don't have to be a performer to be part of the group, which is great. Yeah.
Wow. I love that. It's, what my whole life is just like aimed at.
Me too.
Definitely. Now, are there, let's go into that a little bit more though. Can you talk about maybe some of the differences about what you do between working in a live production versus something that's going to end up on a screen somewhere?
Yes. I mean, specifically with art department for theater, the set designer, that title, is the top. It's their whole world. So when you design a show in theater, you are called the set designer and you are the top dog and everybody's working for you. And often in theater, you're designing the set. You design the set decoration. You're designing the props. Sometimes you can even design the costumes or the lighting, depending. Like I have a friend that I went to grad school with, and she has an off-Broadway show, and I think she's sets and costumes. And that's typical in theater because you're painting a whole picture. So you do a lot more in theater. You're responsible for everything. And then in television, when you're the production designer or sometimes the art director, depending on the title, you're the top dog. It's your vision. But it's very fragmented then after that. There's so many different, everybody has a lane in TV and film, which was weird for me as somebody who came from theater, and I'm like, I do everything. And they're like, no, this is the lane you're in, and do not cross out of the lane because that's somebody else's lane and that's their job, and it's not your job to do their job. And it was just like, ah! So in like TV and film, you have a production designer, you have an art director, you have an assistant art director, you have set designers, you have graphic designers, you have set decorators, you have set dressers, you have buyers, you have all of these titles, props masters, props assistants, like fabricators, carpenters, painters, like foremen. It requires so many more people to do the job because usually the scope of the work is just so much more vast than one set, a 3-wall set with a proscenium. You might have to design 40 sets for a TV show or film. So you just need more people, and it's great that everybody can stay so specialized in their thing, but it can be very frustrating if you're somebody who comes from theater, who wants to do more, you know what I mean? Like it can be tricky. That's why I like doing some of these puppet projects, because they kind of feel like theater.
Right. Yeah.
All the people there are so collaborative. Everyone can wear multiple hats, but you make sure you hire everybody to have their lane. But then there's a lot less like, get out of my lane. It's like, hey, do you want to come give me some ideas? Or, hey, let's three people, like special effects and props and art direction, get together and figure one thing out together. And that doesn't always happen on the bigger things, which can be a little creatively draining.
I imagine with things like the Muppets, a lot of these people have that community because they work together consistently.
Yes.
In that. Now
they're also just more fun generally. Yeah. Just people on those projects are just they're the theater kids. They're not the kids who like grew up idolizing certain filmmakers and just wanting to like win Academy Awards. It's just like it's mostly that same theater feeling of just like the theater nerds.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite Muppet? And are you allowed to tell us?
I've been asked that quite a few times.
I'm sure you do. Yeah.
I mean, you don't get better than Gonzo. But I think I was most excited to meet Fozzie.
Yeah?
When I met Fozzie, it was very exciting.
So when that happens, do you get to, like, you get to meet Fozzie? Is that like a moment that's set up at like when you're brought onto a production? How does this happen anyway?
No. That is not how it works. Although I have gotten to I have had the pleasure to meet quite a few of my childhood characters as the childhood characters, like Gobo and Red Fraggle. I met them.
Wow.
And I was instantly a child again, and it was wonderful. I met Kermit that way.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
And even though, like, he's not necessarily my favorite Muppet, but he is like the Muppet.
He's the guy.
He's the guy.
Yeah.
And I had like a little bit, I was like a single tear, because he was on a set. It was a project that we did that was never supposed to air. It was kind of like a camera test thing. And he was sitting up on a log on this beautiful set that I wish could see the light of day. Mm-hmm. And he looked down at me and he said, "What do you think of my set, Darcy? Like, how do I look?" And like, I just like looked up at him, and like the light was shining in a way that I was just like, "Oh my," and like a single tear like came down my cheek. And I like looked to the right to try to like share this magical moment with like whoever else was there. And it was Brian Henson. And he looks at me like, "What?" Like, he's seen this his whole life. He's not impressed. I was very impressed, but no, those are just magic moments that happen sometimes. Mm-hmm. If you're on set long enough, you have so many bad days, but you have enough of these little like beautiful moments that you're like, yeah, I'm gonna keep doing this. I'll keep coming back for more.
That's incredible, because it's getting to meet an icon like that, and having it be a cool moment too is just so magical.
It shows you the way I was brought up, though, because like on Earth to Ned, a talk show we did, we had 2 celebrities like every day being interviewed. And I think the only time I got emotional was when BB-8 rolled across my set. So my priorities are a little different, maybe.
That's cool.
All the people I was like, "Hey, don't mess up my set." But like BB-8 rolled across, and I was like, "Look at him!"
Oh my gosh! Oh, that's so great. So you've worked with the Muppets, Jim Henson Creature Company. Now I'm gonna mention something for those of you in Pittsburgh. If you have never been to the Children's Museum, they have a bunch of really cool things there. But one of probably my favorite thing there is they have one of the mystics from.
Do you have one of the mystics from the
original Dark Crystal?
From the original Dark Crystal.
Yeah, and it's like basically hidden there.
Yeah.
Like, because now kids these days, I'm sure some of them have good parents who show them movies, but it's like you basically have to ask where it is.
Which is so funny, because that's like a prized possession.
Yeah, it's kind of a big deal.
It's really a big deal.
The mystics are my favorite characters from the Dark Crystal world entirely.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and every time I look at them, I'm like, I have no idea how this is supposed to work. Like as a puppet, as a creature.
Have you seen some of the behind the scenes?
I have, and I still don't get it. I have, and I still don't understand.
They were athletes.
Yeah,
it was insane the things they performed on that original.
It just looks like a real animal, like creature. It's that some of them I'm like, oh, I can see how this works. Like, oh, they're on stilts. I get it, But the mystics just totally capture me every single time. And just the design and the whole, like, everything about
Brian
them.
Froud, man.
Yeah.
Huge inspiration. Favorite artist. He did all the concept work for Dark Crystal and Labyrinth.
I heard that for
his sketches, if you've never seen of those books.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. He did a book called Fairies with Alan Lee, who, of course, we would have a mutual respect for. And it's like one of my favorite books. It's just drawings of these mythical creatures that are just so real. They're just so good. So good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that there's other people that are still captured by these things. It's a lot of my family background, as you may know, is Manx, and there's a whole thing there. But whenever you do come across a book by Alan Lee or some Dark Crystal drawings or something, and you see these corners of the world where there's still people who really cherish and love, this world of the Moon Javega, and it's Yeah, and it's so cool to also just, you've gotten to work with these people, and you are one of these people now. It's like you're
I do not
part of
consider that. But
well, you're part of the Jim Henson Muppet, like whole
tiny part.
But you're a part of it. It's really rad, and
no, I mean, every time I work on that lot, I'm just like, this could be the last time I work here, and I just like soak it in because it is magic. It is. It has not been disappointing growing up, still surrounded by the things that inspired me as a child, and being a part of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now you've done so much already. What's something that you're still itching to do that maybe you haven't done yet?
If I say it out loud, it might never happen. Man, I would love to work on a project in the United Kingdom. That's like it's sad to say. I mean, it's a good and a bad thing. I've accomplished so many of my dreams already, and I'm not that old. It's hard to work in the UK as an American, and I just want to live there so bad, and they do not want us, and I just want to work on a project there someday before I die. I don't even care what the project is.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they filmed so many of my favorite things over there. Like The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth and The Muppet Show and Star Wars and Harry Potter. They're all from the UK. I want to be there. Every time I visit, I'm just like, how do I do this? I'm not single. I was going to say any single UK guys who want to help me get my citizenship. But my boyfriend would not like that.
So you mentioned so many of your dreams have come true.
Yeah.
When was the first moment that you realized that one of your dreams had come true?
Ooh, you're asking deep questions. I'll go a little broader. And I think the fact that so many of my dreams have come true is that I've allowed my dreams to be very fluid throughout my life. I encourage others in the arts to follow suit. I have friends who kind of, from a young age, mapped out what they thought their career path would be and what they would like it to be. And I just don't know how realistic that is in such a finicky and versatile career and industry. So I think the reason so many of my dreams have come true is because they weren't dreams from when I was a kid. They were like, I make up dreams as I go. You know what I mean? And I'm generally happy with wherever I am. Like I have done some really bad television projects. And they led me to the next thing, which was a great project. So it's just, I didn't grow up dreaming that I would work on a marksman competition show for the History Channel and like shoveling cow poop out in the fields with my master's degree and driving 16 passenger vans, which is transpo's job, not a PA. That's why non-union work can be so stressful. But I did it. And I kept a good attitude while I was there. And I went, wow, I'm on a TV project. Look at me. Like, whoa. Even though it was a bad TV project, like I let the dreams come as they come. You know what I mean? I'm not like, if I don't get to do this project, my life will be over. Because a few of those have come and gone. Projects that I really would have loved to have done. And I didn't. And it didn't matter because then I worked on something else that was really cool that wouldn't have happened if I had done the other project. So I just think everyone needs to stay a little loosey-goosey and happy and just kind of let the path take them where it does, because no two people in this industry are going to have the same path. Even if you try to copy somebody else's path, you're not going to. It's just, it's all over the place. So I think just being on a TV show, like, felt like my first dream I didn't even know I wanted to work in TV. I thought I wanted to design for theater, which was laughable because I couldn't pay any of my bills. So it's not like I was like, I better grow up to design scenery for films. Like I thought I'd grow up to be a marine biologist like everybody else who was a child of the 80s with Lisa Frank, Trapper Keepers with dolphins on them. I just want to do creative things with cool people. Mm-hmm. And so each time I do, it feels like a dream. Like it's not like you and I are both the biggest Lord of the Rings fans in the entire world.
Yep.
And I didn't really want to work on the new one. Like I like some things to just be a fan of. It's not like my life was ruined because I didn't get to go to New Zealand to work on the new one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't care. I just want to work on fun things with cool people, and that's a dream. That's a dream to get to do that for your job.
That's a cool point you just made as well, which is like there's some things that I see and I admire and I like, and I'm like, oh, I want to do that. I want to be a part of something like that, you know. But there's some things that I'm just a fan, and like for instance, one of my heroes is Johnny Knoxville.
Nice.
I don't want to meet him because I've heard so many stories of people who've just been around that guy, and all of them make me think like this guy is so awesome and nuts. But I'm like, I don't ever want to be around the guy ever. Not for anything wrong. Like I'm scared of him is what it is.
Yeah.
I'm terrified that someone like that is possible.
Yeah.
You know, and it's part of why I'm like, this is like I say, he's a hero of mine, but I don't want to, you know.
Well, because if you met and worked with him, even if you had some really cool memories or moments, there would also be bad ones, which has happened to me working with some of my heroes. And it's, you know, if you want the good, sometimes you have to take the bad with it. But sometimes it's nice to just still have something that you can just be a fan of. Mm-hmm. Because as much as I love Lord of the Rings, we were both of us too young to work on the first one. Mm-hmm. And that's ultimately, I would have wanted to have been a part of that. Yeah. And we can't. We can't go back in time. Mm-hmm. So then it's like, I don't need to be a part of, you know, any future stuff, because man, the internet it's just a mean place these days. And so I have found that it does not matter what you work on and how proud you might be of the work you've created. People are going to hate it and tear it down, even if there's also people who love it and lift it up. So it's just, it can be a tricky, vulnerable place to put yourself in, to work on something that you love so much, knowing that you're going to have a hard time pleasing anybody, just anybody these days.
Yeah. And
so sometimes it's almost better to have a little separation or to have something new that like people don't have preconceived notions about, because then it's like you're not disappointing anybody. They could say it's like maybe not as great of a movie or show as it should have been, but they're not like, you ruined.
Yeah,
you
definitely
ruined this IP, and you're like, no, I didn't. Like, you don't know how hard this was. So it can be a little tricky to put yourself out there anymore in this industry. Just stay out of the comment sections, which is hard to do.
Yeah, I imagine that's also just got to be tough, because if you do get negative feedback from the unwashed masses of the public, you know, thank you for joining our show, everybody. Then, you know, it's like, oh, well, am I a psycho if I just completely dismiss another person's opinion? Or like, I don't know, you could get into all kinds of brain traps with that one, but it's like, no, it's just, don't worry about it. You know,
and some of them I agree with. Mm-hmm. Like, I remember when we did the Curious Creations of Christine McConnell.
What alliteration.
I know.
Goodness. Yeah.
She and I talked about it before, Christine and I talked about it before the show premiered. It was just like, you want to say stay out of the comment section, but like, how could she? She's like the face of the show. So it was just like, I remember she and I talking about it, like the day it premiered, we had a party, at the Jim Henson Company. She came and picked me up, and we drove together. And I said to her, I was like, no one is going to say anything about the show that you and I have not already said. Meaning, she and I are both such perfectionists, and it doesn't matter because we only had a certain amount of time. We only had a certain amount of money. We had people to answer to above us that were not, like, we didn't just get carte blanche on decisions, even though it was like her name in the project. We were, you know what I mean? Every project, unless you self-create, self-produce, self-everything, you're answering to some people who give you the money or give you the space or give you, there's limitations.
Yeah.
And limitations can be great because it means things get done, because otherwise half these shows would just never get done. But I was like, you and I know what we had to work with and what miracles we pulled off. And none of these people in comment sections were there and saw the 18-hour days we were working and how much like blood, sweat, and heart we poured into this project. So it's like, you can like it or not, and that's your opinion, but it's like, if you're the creator, sometimes you just have to go, you know what, I could have done better, or I did the very best I could given what I had to work with, and therefore I'm proud of it, and I can't let anybody else's opinions affect the way I feel about the project. And so I just remember saying that, like, you and I know what we could have done better and what we wish we could have done with time and money. So, like, really no one else's opinions should affect us. It's not that they don't matter, because everybody's allowed to, it's art. Everybody's going to have different opinions. Mm-hmm. But when you can self-critique your own work and really look at it and reflect on the things you succeeded at, the things you could have done better, the things you wish you just had a little more time or money for, then that's all you need. You don't need anybody else's opinion, because it's like you could ask your mentors for opinions.
Yeah.
People you trust and respect who actually understand kind of what the project was, and, oh, did you think about, you know, something I've seen in the past is maybe if I had done it this way or instead of that. Like, I think it's good to reflect after a project, to learn.
And compartmentalize the feedback that you get.
Have to.
Yeah.
You
so
have
it's
to.
not just, oh, well, I saw this thing online or whatever, but you make it a point to, you know, have that funnel and stream of information for you so that you can, I am going to pay attention to this. Yeah. Not that.
And sometimes I agree with some of the criticism.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I hated that scene too. Or, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I had one day to design that set. So is it my best work? It's my best work in one day. Mm-hmm. But it's not something, I'm not putting it up against something that I had 3 months to design.
Now, I got a question also about that with the work that you do, the work that you enjoy the most, I guess, like the projects that you enjoy the most. Do those align with your favorite type of things to watch?
No.
No? Okay, cool. That was nice. You're quick. So, so there's stuff that you love watching. I mean, we mentioned there are examples of this where there's stuff that you didn't want to be a part of, sure. But there's things that you do watch that you do like that are completely the opposite of the kinds of things that you want to make.
It's not that they're the opposite of the things I want to make.
All right.
It's at this point in my career, I can watch a show where I'm like, ooh, this was a lot of work with a lot of people and a lot of money and a lot of producers, and I bet some people had a bad time on it. But man, it's great television, you know what I mean? Like, I love watching certain shows that I can recognize were probably a difficult work environment.
And you see that on the set and the costumes, or through the actors, or when you're watching behind the scenes?
I think it's because
how do you see that?
I've gotten to the point now where I know how much money it takes to make certain projects. And I can also look on IMDb and maybe see who the production designer or producers or directors were that maybe don't have a great reputation based on other people that I know who've worked with them, you know? so I can appreciate, like, this is some beautiful cinema. And I would not take the job. Like, if your goal is to only work on things that win awards, you might be in some tough environments because they might have to be run a little stricter, and you don't get as much fun on set.
But on the other hand, you have some environments that you mentioned where maybe they were lower budget or non-union, like you said, you were doing transport and PA stuff and all this. It's like, so there's, on the one hand, you have a lack of a budget makes things more difficult, but then on the other end, you've got
the biggest budgets.
The biggest budgets make it. So is there a sweet spot?
There is,
in there?
And it's the people. Sweet spot's the people. I love to say, like, at this point in my career, like, I do not care what the project is. I did a movie in Hawaii last year, and like, it didn't matter what it was. I knew who the art department was, and I knew they were people that I'd want to spend 12 plus hours a day of my life with. Plus I got to go to Hawaii for 4 months. So it was just like,
it's great. Yeah.
I'm taking the project. It doesn't matter to me what the project is. But I do have to tell people that are just starting out that you might have some bad times on set when you're starting out, because I think it's important to take everything, like, within reason, things that are paying you, things, don't be exploited if you can help it by just doing free projects for everybody. Do those on the weekend while you have a paid job in the week. I just mean, there have been plenty of shows that my boss was quite mean to me, and I would cry in the bathroom at least once a week just to keep it out, just like keep it together and get through this project. You need the money, you need the experience, you need the resume credit. I don't want to do that anymore if I don't have to.
Right.
But that took a decade for me to get to the point where I can maybe pick projects. And, at this point, when work comes back, I might have to take a project that I don't want to again because we've been out of work for so long. So there is value to taking those projects. I think you learn a lot of lessons on them. I do. I would love to only have fun on set. I would love to only work with nice people. I don't understand the mean people now that I've worked with so many people at the top of their game who are just lovely.
Yeah.
They're lovely, even when they're balancing just as much stress and budgets. Now, they can have plenty of bad days, and you forgive them for that because these projects are hard. But I'm talking about majority lovely. Like, you're going to get yelled at every once in a while on these projects. There's a lot of ego, a lot of stress, a lot of money. You can't take it personally. But if you're getting yelled at every single day and you feel like you're not allowed to leave your desk to, like, take a bathroom break because, like, you're being watched down to the minute of, like, your work, I just, like, don't think it's necessary.
Yeah, I mean, it's been proven time and time again with people at the top of their game, like you said, that you don't have to be that way in order to make it happen. And that was a myth that a lot of, even some of the filmmakers that I like a lot of their work the most, some of them, and you'd hear about, oh, that person's a tyrant on set. I'm like, that's weird, because there's this other person who makes even better films, I think, more complex, different budget sizes and with more stars or whatever, and they and everybody only has nice things to say about them, so it kind of sounds like they've got a problem, and if they're just shifting that off to, oh, well, this is what I got to do this, it's like, no, it kind of sounds like you're not taking responsibility for, like you said, everybody has bad days.
Yes.
But if you're just like, oh, well, this is how I have to be a jerk in order to get things done this way, it's like,
you don't.
No. And if you have hired people who you think are like that, first off, you're probably wrong. And also, get a different team. I don't know what to tell you. Like, this isn't.
There are some people
you shouldn't have to maintain
that continuously work that are a bad time on set, and I don't understand how they continuously work.
I think they just don't care. Like, or maybe not don't care, but it's
Well, it's because the people hiring them are not usually the ones on set with them every day.
And it's not a priority for them to...
They want the good work. Yeah, and let me make another little point. When I say I'm having a good time on set, that does not mean I'm not working 12 to 14 hours a day and really pedal to the metal and putting out good work. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about goofing off all day and working like a leisurely 8 hours. The projects are always demanding. They're always hard. Like, I'm often at my desk for many, many hours a day when I'm set designing, or I'm just at the studio for most of my day. As a production designer, I rarely go home. So I'm not talking about the job being like easy. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about it not being toxic.
Yes. And there's a lot to be said for making the job less toxic can actually help people to work harder and longer. There's an old movie called Mutiny on the Bounty with Charles Laughton in it. It's a great film. I think it's from the 1930s, and great movie. And there's this really, really mean ship captain in it. It's the British, I believe it's the Royal Navy, and he's a tyrant, at least that's how it's portrayed in the film. In history, he wasn't necessarily particularly awful for a ship captain, but it was a rough job, but there's this moment where one of the crew members is talking about what they've had to endure with this captain, and they say, listen, if you would treat us this way and this and that, he said, you wouldn't have a lot of the problems in the Navy that you do. He said, we would sweep the seas for England and take over the whole world. And they did. But it's, you can, I think that's a big misconception that people have a lot of the time is, that people don't want to work hard. It's like, if people are in something like the film industry,
they're hard workers.
Yeah, it's like they don't want to have. There's a difference between a lot of hard work and a bad work environment.
There is,
and also something about having the maturity to realize that there are bad days.
Yes,
and realizing that's a different thing.
I talked to my crew about that.
Yeah,
people who haven't worked for me. The thing I love the most of production designing is I get to hire my crew. And I work with so many really talented, amazing artists when I production design, because I get to handpick them. But sometimes somebody's busy on another project, so they can't. So I have to find like a new person to fill in a void. And I do explain to them, I'm like, it will happen over the course of the next 4 months that I will probably snip at you at one point. If it's not like a daily occurrence, and this is the first time, I'm like, understand, I probably just came out of a meeting where I got my ass handed to me, and I will always find you by the end of the day and apologize. I said, now, if it's something where that's happening daily, then it's probably a conversation that we have to have, because your work is probably not up to the standards that I need it to be. But I'm like, just know, I'm the same 9 times out of 10. Every once in a while, you're going to catch me on a bad day. Just know, I will come back around and apologize once whatever I have been dealing with that probably had nothing to do with you. And it has happened, and I do take accountability when it does happen, because sometimes it's just chaos, and the 30th thing has been piled on my head for the day, and I'm human, and I lose it, and I try not to do it in a, like a personal way. It's just kind of like the pressure explodes, and everybody who's in my vicinity is gonna get a little bit of it. But if that happens every once in a while, you're fine. It's the people who that happens every day that's like, what are we doing? With that conversation that you just described, do you give that, like, is that a one-on-one thing with just the new person, or is that the first day for your entire crew? Well, it wasn't the first day of my first project, because I didn't know. I didn't know how I was going to handle production designing, which, was not great on my first project, but I learn a little bit more each time, become a little bit better each time. But Brian Henson gave me one of the best compliments ever one time. He said, Darcy brings the best people. And I think that's because they enjoy working with and for me. Because they know I expect a lot. My standards are high. I do expect my crew to want to be there, to want to be on the projects. You know what I mean? Like I tell my crew about the projects and be like I ask them if they want, you know what I mean? The people that I work with often, like I'll explain to them if I know a certain project's going to be a certain way. And I'm like, if you turn me down, you're still my first call on the next one. But I like people to know what they're getting into to a certain degree.
Could that be things like things unique to the project, like, hey, it's going to be really cold where we're filming? Or
Sure.
like, what are some of the things that might turn people off to a project?
Well, if it's non-union versus union work is a big thing, because union work is better paid. You get contributions to like a pension and health insurance. You don't get those things on non-union work, but every once in a while, like a cool non-union project will come up that's only 30 days that I think is going to be really fun. And I'll try. And so like, I'll say, hey, if you have union work right now, take it. But like, here's a project. I think you'd have a lot of fun on it. Let me explain to you what it is. Here's the rate. If you want it, it's yours. So things like that. Or when I'm interviewing now I know I get to like interview my production designer back if I'm being interviewed as a set designer. I say, are we working weekends? Because often set design work is Monday through Friday, 8 to 6:30, which is a short day compared to like most projects, because you don't get much work out of your computer artists after that long of a day. You're fried. So I say, are we working 10-hour days? Or are we working 12-hour days? I want to know that up front. I want to know what studio we're filming in, because commutes are a thing in Los Angeles that could really, if you have to go to Manhattan Beach, you could be in your car 3 hours a day. So it's a consideration. And I want to know, do you expect weekend work? Because I don't even think about it that much anymore, because I often do not do weekend work. But some projects now are expecting their workers at least 6 days a week, which is like no work-life balance. Like it's already hard enough when you're working 12 hours a day to have work-life balance. But now you want me to come in on Saturdays too. So I just like to know that up front. And if it's a project where I know that's expected because of the tight time schedule, like I will tell my crew that up front. By the way, this one, like at the Henson Company, you're often doing a 10-hour day. They're a little more family oriented there. But then like the Muppets, it was sometimes 16-hour days. And with my same crew, I had to, I'm like, hey, this isn't going to be our normal, this is a different project. So I need you to know that going in, and I need you to think about if you're willing to do those hours and if it's something you're comfortable with, because I don't want to get into a situation where 2 weeks in, they're like, this isn't what I signed up for. You know what I mean? I'm like, you don't have to take the project. I'll find somebody else, but like, I want you there. I love working with you, but it's not going to be a 10-hour day. That's out of my control on this one project. You know what I mean? So you do have to, I like to let my crew know those things in advance.
A lot of the projects that we've talked about up to this point have been, fantasy, fiction, or stuff like that, or modern with reality television and such. I had asked you before when we were doing our Lord of the Rings marathon.
Nerds.
Yes, and
It was so good.
yeah, and not the first or last time
No.
that either of us have done that. But we did when you came over for that. I asked you about if you had done any historical projects, and you said not so much. Is that something that production designers and set designers will specialize in? Like, oh, this person does more fantasy or sci-fi, this person does more historical, or not? Like, would
I do think people can kind of get roped into little niche, like their own niches. Like I might be the puppet person at this point, and I'm fine with that. No, I mean, today there's just so much content that I think people can jump around. It's more of like your relationship with a director and a producer, and they'll pull you onto different things. Because I've worked with like Maria Queso, production designer, and we did Penny Dreadful, the new one that was it was either 28 or 38, Los Angeles. That was the most expensive set I've ever worked on. The money, my goodness. But then I've done other projects with her that are completely different. So she gets hired on all these different projects. So I don't think you necessarily get pigeonholed so much anymore, which is good. Like art department, it doesn't matter if they are similar projects. Every project you come into, you're reinventing the wheel. You have to figure out what that world is. Even if you're somebody who's like, I did American Crime, which was like very standard sets. It was one of my first jobs as a set designer, which was a great project. It was like 8-foot walls with baseboard and crown molding. Like there wasn't a lot of like fancy detail stuff that I had to get into. Like Penny Dreadful, some of those facades that we designed were like the most elaborate architecture I've had to do. And I learned a lot by doing it. But thankfully, I had quite a few other projects under my belt by the time I got to that one. And even Mindhunter was historical. I think I was telling you there was a scene with a Xerox in it, and it was 1979. And Xerox machines did not look the same as they do today. Like they had to get one from the Xerox museum, and then I had to like measure it and draw it so we could build a replica. Like had like curved glass with like fluorescent bulbs underneath and like the piece of leather that you put over and then back. Like I had no idea. So then it got to the point where I would be designing a very seemingly simple set, like something not fantasy, but still complicated. And the production designer was Steve Arnold, who's done like House of Cards, like big detail, very architecturally rich. He's like a very talented designer that way. And his attention to detail is like insane.
Can you give me an example of that?
Sure. Yeah. I was in charge of the Omni Hotel set, which we did in Century 3 Mall here in Pittsburgh for the local listeners, in their Macy's, their old, or one of their department stores, which is so wild, turning a mall that you shopped at as a child into a set as an adult. So I would take his research and then he had like a concept illustrator kind of doing rough models, Cassidy Shipley, and I would take his models and kind of just fine tune them and add details and then turn them into construction drawings. I mean, we had the kind of time on that show that Steve would come around and look at a gap, like a half-inch gap I had put between panels as a design element. And he'd be like, I think we can change that to a 1/4 inch. And I was like, we have this kind of time that like we can be changing things by 1/4 inches. And it's like,
okay.
Because that was a big change, because then I had to go and I had to figure out all the paneling on the whole set again with shifting out the details. Yeah. So, I mean, it was that meticulous on Mindhunter. And that
over a larger pattern of panels, it's like that would give it like an overall different...
A completely different look.
Wow.
Whereas most people would go, it's a background and it's probably going to be in soft focus and it doesn't really matter, which is kind of how I function as a production designer. I'm just like, doesn't matter. Let's move on. Like there are other things to do. But it was kind of a gift to get to work with somebody that meticulous.
Yeah.
Because
measurable detail. That's
it blew my mind to the possibility of like working on projects that give you enough time and money that you can really dial in the detail. You know what I mean? Because that project, we had like 10 months for 10 episodes. That's not normal. That was a lot of time, which is why that show's so brilliant. Like, I think that show I love watching that show. But yeah, there are certain expectations that come with that. Because then you have to be like, I really have to go change this whole set over 1/4 inch. You know what I mean? Like, that's one of those moments where you're just like, does this really matter? But it doesn't matter because you're not the boss, so you have to do it.
Now, is that something also that when you're dealing with larger productions, I've heard a lot of stories of sets where Lord of the Rings, great example, where they would stamp the leather on the inside of the armor where no one would see it. Or I forget what film it was, but it was
Titanic was like that too.
Oh, was it?
The attention to detail and things that like no one
would
probably
never
even
see.
saw.
Yeah. Or like when in a a period piece, they'll have a waste bin and the newspaper that is thrown away is from that year and month that the scene's happening in.
I think that is artisans who were like really into their job.
Who just like it's almost like, yeah, I love doing this. Yeah. That's why.
Which is like the people I hire would do stuff like that without me asking them.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is why you hire them, because they're going to make the production better. They're going to be like, I know it doesn't matter, but I looked up the exact newspaper from this day in history, and that's what I printed to be the prop. Like, that's because they're good at their job, and they enjoy their job, and they have enough support where they have the time to do their job properly. You know what I mean? They're not like rushing as much to get something done where they can take the time and the pride. I have workers all the time who come up to me and they're like, look at this cool detail I put into this prop or this piece of set dressing or blah, 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 blah. Like on Muppets Haunted Mansion, my set decorator, Janine, she could walk you around that attic set and tell you the story of why each husband, well, this was her China era, and so therefore she had blah, blah, blah. She, like, it was such a great thing on that project because anybody who came to visit set, I'm like, Janine, go show him the attic set, because I knew she would take him around and tell him these stories, and it's just like the richness. And I didn't ask her to do that. I was like, decorate the attic for the Haunted Mansion because I knew she loved it, that she was going to like go above and beyond and like find the perfect pieces and create the perfect pieces, and like everything had a backstory because she's good at her job.
Now, when you're making these things that are like parts of the set, how often are you needing to create stuff like that maybe the way that it would have been created in real life? For instance, the newspaper example that we had for the waste bin was printed out, but you probably didn't use an old newspaper printer for it, right?
Would use like a plotter and just print on newsprint.
Okay, yeah. So it's like, do you go into using LaserJet versus something else for
whatever's
when you're doing that
fast
kind of thing?
and cost effective, unless it's a hero. If it's like a hero prop that's going to be like, the camera's going to get real close to it, and it's like, if you can spend the money on that and the time on that. So you do have to look at everything, including sets. You look at how many page counts a set exists, and then there's priorities. Like, you cannot put all of with these times and budgets, you cannot put everything into every piece unless you have that kind of time. If you don't, you have to prioritize. How is this prop used? Is it a hero prop? Is it used by a main character? Is there a close-up on it? How many pages do we spend on this set? How many angles of this set do you see? Like, you have to, because otherwise you won't get it done, because there are these deadlines. So that's one of the first things I do when I'm production designing. I read it for fun, the script for fun, just to like get a feeling. And then when you start breaking it down, you could be the most excited about one little piece of set, but if they only spend 2 pages on it, and there's a more boring set that they're there for like 10 pages, guess what? That's where you got to put more time and money, because that's where the camera's going to be more often. It's not theater, so
there's one film, Alien, which for a short amount of the film has like one of the biggest, craziest sets for it. And I remember hearing some behind the scenes stuff where the producers, I think it was the producer, someone who had the right to get upset, was like, why are you putting so, like, is this where the climax of the film is going to be, or is this going to be like a bigger scene? It's like, we're going to spend like 3 minutes in here. And it's this crazy, iconic, big moment. Are there exceptions when you're going through a breakdown like that you can think of?
Well, I mean, that's one right there. And it could be like the director's vision. It's just like, no, it can't be this little thing. And sometimes you have to go back and forth a few times to be like, okay, You want it to be this huge thing, but we're only there for 10 minutes, and I have $15 to pull it off. So, like,
yeah,
let's come up with a creative solution.
mm-hmm.
But it has to be, somebody has to want it.
Yeah.
It could be the production designer. It could be the director. It could be a producer. Somebody's going to have to fight for that.
Now, in film versus theater, one of the big differences that can happen is that in theater, the book, the script is the Bible. It's scripture. You never mess with it no matter what. And then in film, a lot of the time the script is fluid all the way up through editing, you know, or you might even say, oh, let's add a line here for voiceover when the character's not on screen.
Do a pickup and...
Yeah. Or an actor might be inspired on the day and improvise something, or in rehearsals they might come up with something new. I'm not sure I've ever heard of a case where the script changed because of set design. Is that kind of what you were saying there happens? Yeah. I could be wrong, but at the top of my head, I don't think I've ever heard of that happening. That's a really cool revelation for me.
The great thing is the sets are being designed usually long before actors are there. So the reason you probably haven't heard of it happening is because it's not going to happen on the fly.
Right.
It's going to happen earlier in pre-production.
Right.
Like, even as simple as we did this camera test thing, and it was like a backstage dressing room. Mm-hmm. And my set decorator brought all these vintage suitcases to just like decorate the front of camera, and like it was just these beautiful, beautiful things, and all of the directors looking at them. And he changed the whole script. He's like, okay, she's packing for a trip. Suitcases, front of camera. That's where the business is. They're down there front, you know. So it maybe didn't change the script, but it changed the whole scene.
Yeah.
Like, I think the lines were still the same, but the business was different.
Mm-hmm.
Now she's packing for a trip and throwing things in the suitcase and slamming them shut. And that wasn't in the script. That was just because the set decorator brought the suitcases.
That's so cool, because I think for so long, a lot of the way that I've thought about a lot of production designers and set designers is, you know, interpreting the script and the story. And there's things that you might put around that contribute, like definite support the world, or, you know, you might go to somebody's apartment and you can see by the way that the Chinese takeout is piled up that, you know, how long it's been since they threw that away, you know, and like they just keep stacking these, and how there's story and character all around. But
you can absolutely change the script as the designer.
Go the other way.
Yeah, it just happened on Waffles and Mochi.
Wow.
We talked through a million different ways that the set could reveal the magic cart. I came up with like the window spins around, and then there's this. Oh, here this thing cuts apart and goes out. You can absolutely. And there's other times I design things because I have an idea, or it's not in the script, and I tell the director, by the way, I made this panel loose, so this could be a secret door because I think it could be something that's worthwhile to the script. Or I learned that, like, you can't just design a set and hope people will use it the way you interpreted. You kind of almost have to sell your set back to them after you've done it. You're like, I put these 3 steps in there because I thought it would be a great moment when the one actor needs a place to sit. I thought this would be framed really nicely. So if you have that good that good relationship with your director, they're hiring you because they're hoping maybe you have some cool ideas too. Like when I work with Brian Henson, it's a lot like that. Like he'll be like, "Why'd you put that there?" And I'm like, "Oh, because I thought this could happen there." And, you know, love it or hate it, they don't have to use it, but like you kind of have to sell back why you made some of your decisions, because it's like if they don't know that you can remove that one panel and it can open up to a whole other part of the set, then they're never going to use it. So you have to be like, here's your playground. I built all these different monkey bars and swing sets into it. They're yours for the taking. And it just gives it, you're helping enhance the story. It gives your director something else to work with.
And even
if they want.
Yeah.
They might not.
And even if some of those things aren't end up being used, I think it's a lot like when a writer writes a screenplay that maybe doesn't get produced. You're still writing. You're still becoming a better writer. And even if those toys aren't part of that particular project, like explicitly on screen, it still can add so much to the environment for the director, for the actors, who like it just helps fill in their imagination for what they're doing. So it's always of some type of value.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree. And I have, when I have these working relationships with some of the puppeteers that I've worked with, they have come to me and I have a great idea for my character. What if he collects vintage DVDs? Like just like the dumbest, like whatever. And you're just like, okay, let's think about that. Where would they go? And then they show you on set. Like sometimes it's not even out on camera. They're just like, I think it'd be fun if he had whatever. And then if you have the time, I'm like, absolutely. What do you want? Like, do you have ideas? Like, so I've gone to the puppeteers before when we're early on in a project. Like, they're doing character development. They're creating their character at the same time as you're creating the set. So you might say, like, what do you, tell me what you think about this character. And then you might get inspired to come up with some stuff for their dressing or a prop. Again, collaboration. It's like when people work together, I think there's better results.
And just making sure that there's clear communication through all of it.
Yes, I've also been on situations where you show up to set and they're like, where's that thing? And you're like, no one ever asked for that thing. And they're like, but I want it. And you're like, that's like a 3-week custom order. Like, I'm good, but I can't create that for you in the next 10 minutes. Like, can we come up with a creative solution that's somewhere in the middle? But it's like, if you told me 3 weeks ago you wanted it, I would have happily given it to you. But like, I can't read your mind. So that can be hard because you don't want to let anybody down. But at the same time, if nobody asked for something, like you can't always read people's minds.
Wow. Well, if I haven't made it clear, this is like, I love having conversations like that with people. And hearing some of your stories is just so, it's enlightening, it's inspiring, it's fun, and it's so clear that you still are so like alive and joyful with the work that you do, which is just always great to come across anyone who loves what they do.
I do love what I do.
Yeah.
But I also take lots of breaks from what I do. Yeah. Which is important too.
How do you take a break? What do you do?
I travel. My life motto at this point is to work on fun, creative projects with great people and travel the world. I know some people who don't ever take a day off. Like a project's ending and they're already lining up their next thing. I try to keep my life expenses low enough that is not how I have to function. If I finished a particularly stressful project where I'm working 12, 14 hours a day for 6 months, I book a trip. I go to Scotland or New Zealand or Italy or Peru. Or just even local. I did a road trip around Utah. Like I have to go somewhere. If you're only working and that's all you're doing and you're in a creative field, what's inspiring you? You got to find something that like refills your bucket and like makes you excited to give you new ideas. Otherwise, you're doing the same thing over and over again. So yeah, I like to take trips in between shows, and I plan them in advance. So even if I get a really cool offer, I'll say I'm available in 2 weeks. And sometimes they're like, "Well, then we can't use you on this project," and I go, "Have fun," because I'm still taking my trip.
I think it's good to prioritize breaks for sure, because otherwise it just won't happen.
They won't. No one will encourage you to take time off. You have to be your own advocate.
And when you do travel, are you mostly going to like what kind of places do you go to when you go to, say, another country? Are you going mostly to historical sites or the cities or the museums or amusement parks? What kind of stuff do you gravitate?
All of those things that you just said. I love museums. I love cities. I love old architecture. I'm like, just old architecture fills me up, but so do landscapes, because I was a camp counselor for many years of my life. So, in Scotland, yes, I love going to Edinburgh, but Isle of Skye for 3 days, where all you're seeing are beautiful vistas, that's just as inspiring to me as like the architecture. But I do love architecture. That's the main thing. But I like so many things. Like I love theater. I love architecture. I love amusement parks. I love museums. I love camping. I love hiking. I love being outdoors with nobody close to me. You know what I mean? So I want it all. I'm greedy with my entertainment and travels. I want everything. I try to balance it out.
Well, that's I agree. Me too. And I've enjoyed this conversation so much.
Me too.
Thanks. It's been great to just catch up, talk with you, and learn so much from you as well. Thank you so much for being my guest. And
happy I was in town.
Yeah, I just barely got you there. And so thank you for making time for this. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Absolutely. And for those of you listening here, any types of stuff that, whether it's how to follow Darcy or keep up with what she's doing, if there's any of that she'd be interested in you checking out, it's going to be in the description. Welcome to the modern age. And but thanks again. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, that's our show. And if you just cannot wait for the next one, why don't you go back for an earlier one and just pretend you haven't seen it before up to this point. Bye-bye. Hey, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you want to start your own podcast, why wait? Reach out to us at StudioME.me, and I hope you hear me again soon.